Well, Eric, getting things kicked off here this week, of course, wanting to, touch base on a little bit of the severe storms that happened over the weekend. Of course, continuing for a lot of places that, may not necessarily need all the moisture that they're continuing to get. Also wanting to talk about how, we're transitioning now from spring into summer, kind of giving us a little bit of a recap of, what we've experienced these last couple of months. We saw just a big reversal of drought conditions for multiple areas, getting a lot of drought to be broken in some places, while, still some growing deficits in some concerning areas for parts of the Corn Belt. So what do you got for us this week in terms of, kind of where we are in the short term, where we've been, and what we could see here for the short term moving forward?
Yeah, it was a relatively violent start to summer, to be honest with you. And if you have a look at it, we saw on Saturday a bunch of severe weather here, and again last night. And then we also saw another outbreak of tornadoes in Illinois and Indiana. And yesterday, I just grabbed a quick snapshot of what those storms look like at the end of the day. And look at all of the haze that's down here. That's all haze from wildfire smoke and from the Saharan dust. There's been wildfires over in parts of Utah as of late, but we've seen repeated large complexes of storms roll through this part of the country and over into this section of the United States as well. On radar, this was just through early this morning. We watched one storm system exit east, and then we had to see this big bow echo that came out of Kansas. Watch it again here. It came out of parts of Kansas and Colorado straight through Oklahoma, racing through and doing quite a bit of damage. And that just brings me to this point of like what 2026 has looked like in terms of severe weather, especially as of late. Now, as of late, a lot of focus has been on Illinois, and that's because up to this point, there's been 196 reports of tornadoes in Illinois. And if you want to put that into context, like look at how much it stands out compared to every other state. And one of the big reasons for this is big protected Bermuda high has been here. It's been focusing the moisture in. High pressure over the west has been driving it in this direction. And it's all kind of met right here in the middle, which has been my home state of Illinois. Just numerous reports of damaging weather around this area. It's important to look at this in a context for Illinois tornadoes. Right now, we are 7 standard deviations above the mean. Like statistically, that's ridiculous. Average number of tornadoes through this point in the year should be 26. We're at 196, way, way over here. But it brings up an important point. And I'm going to go to one of my favorite articles written in the last decade. It was written by Harold Brooks and Victor Gansini. And what was written here was a study of the spatial trends of tornado frequency across the country. And it comes to an important point we've been discussing for years, and that the new epicenter of tornadic activity tends to be more in the Mississippi Valley. Doesn't mean there aren't western, plains tornadoes. It just means there's been an increase as you work your way toward the Mississippi River. And we've certainly seen that this year. It also brings up an important point about when these storms start to explode the way they do, we're getting more and more of our rainfall from them. And as a result, the frequency of heavy rainfall events has been increasing. So this is by state since the 80s, what the likelihood is now compared to them in terms of getting 2 inches of rain in a day. I mean, in Iowa, it's 1.5 times. In the Dakotas, it's almost 3 times. And up the East Coast, it's almost 3 times. So it's important to kind of take note of some of these big differences overall. Dawson, just to give you one more piece of information here, since we're talking historical weather data, the April to October rainfall totals in the primary corn and soybean belt have actually increased since 1950 by 4 inches. So see how this all kind of ties together. With it, you get more severe weather, but you get more rain. And the problem is you get stuff like this. My colleague Andrew Pritchard took this video in central Illinois yesterday, and this is just widespread across the region. A lot of flooding rain just continuing to hammer certain regions. I also want to point something else out, Dawson. In a minute, we're going to talk about July. And just thinking about all these trends, I made a graph that shows from 1950 to present where there has been increase or decrease in total precipitation in July. And this has us all wondering because of where things are going to be going here in the near term after what you saw in June. I mean, just look at the data I have here in June for total rainfall. I've kind of labeled where it's wet and where it's flooding. But we cannot ignore the fact that there are spots that are very dry. I mean, Dawson, where you are, you get on I-80 and drive west and get yourself over to like Sioux Falls or something, and they're just begging for rain, whereas the eastern part of Iowa has had, 8 to 10, in some places in Illinois, over a foot of rainfall. Are you hearing about that a lot in Iowa?
Yeah, I mean, so driving anywhere from central to northeast Iowa, things have been looking fairly good. It's always wondering how establishment is going to go, but, uniformity from central Iowa up to northeast Iowa, I'd say is fairly good. And then, of course, in western Iowa, we've been hearing from a couple of people that, yeah, they could definitely use the moisture.
Yeah. And given these ranks where like Eastern Iowa's second wettest, Northwestern Iowa's 121st wettest, that's a huge span. But it's important to note where it's been really wet. You can kind of find the corridor in through here where it's been so wet. We have drought, of course, east and drought to the west. And as I think about where the soil moisture values have really been changing, I mean, this map kind of shows us where we are on this first full day of summer. But it's kind of what you can derive from that I think that's critical. So I've been working on this now for a year, and I've been showing it, this past 2 weeks. But this is our season to date versus normal leaf wetness hours. And Dawson, I mean, the thing that's most striking about this is how much above average the humidity and the moisture has been to the south, which as we get into those typical southerly winds in July and August could be increasing disease pressure farther to the north, where the conditions are really ideal for certain fungal pressures, which means we have to get out ahead of this and start to get proactive in terms of protecting this crop going forward. Because going forward, I mean, look at the next 2 weeks or 10 days. The European models on the left, GFS is on the right. I mean, there's still more rain in this pattern and it's not slowing down. I am happy to show you that today there's going to be some severe storms. I mean, I'll take the severe because they're bringing rain to the east. They need it there. And then watch the storms not only today, but as you get into tomorrow, this would be Tuesday, and then on Wednesday up the Western Plains, one of our drier spots in the country. Now, bigger picture, let's just stick with the next 10 days, but let's get down to the two operational runs of the European model on the left and the GFS on the right. That's 10 days, and that's storms. And you brought up something at the beginning of this we need to just stress here. When you transition into summer, the precipitation distribution changes a lot because it's all thunderstorm driven. There's no longer just big sweeping fronts that give everybody rain, and instead you tend to see much more hyper local rainfall events. So these maps, you just have to step back and blur your eyes and kind of see the corridors rather than try to pinpoint exactly who's going to get what in terms of rainfall. What I can do is look at some probabilities. On the left, it's who's wet, and on the right, it's who's dry. And you can see there's some pretty big standout areas. But I've labeled one spot right down here in Texas I want to keep a very close eye on going into July. I'm going to make a case for that in a few moments after we look at what the pattern could do and what the temperatures might look like. I think by the time we get to July 2nd, 3rd, 4th, we're going to get into a setup like this. There's going to be a ridge somewhere. If it's over Texas, those dotted areas are going to get storms. That's just the way it's going to be if the ridge sits over Texas. The models right now are thinking that through June 30th to July 6th. You can almost see, as I've labeled it here, where we think that week 2 precipitation pattern could really become established. But bigger questions are going to be about the temperatures because right now, this is what things look like. Tomorrow, this is Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. There's a lot of cool weather in the central states while it's hot down south. What I want to know is as we get into this weekend, there is a big low coming into the northwest and racing up into Canada, and it's going to open a large warm sector here. It's going to be extremely hot there, extremely hot here, and temperatures really filling in the middle with 80s, 90s, through the Mississippi Valley. And as this happens, this ridge is going to form, and we're going to want to know where it's going to stay. So there's your next 5 days. But look, you get out there day 5 through 10, see the heat building in. Day 10 through 15, some of the models are really trying to bring in much above average temperatures into this area, including this part of Canada. If it stays there, that's a problem. If it just meanders west or meanders east, then it's okay. We can handle short duration heat events. We cannot handle the long duration mega heat waves. So Dawson, that's what I've got in terms of just a look back at history, plus some important research on tornadoes and precipitation trends. And then here's the next couple of weeks in terms of temperature and precip.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you pointed out a couple areas that, yeah, it looks like we're going to get some heat units really coming in for some of those drier areas, but at the same time, it could bring hopefully some storms to kind of relieve some precipitation. Wanting to look though, longer term too, as we've continued to kind of identify these summer forecasts. You gave me a date. That was June 21st. June
Yeah.
21st is gone and past. What are you kind of thinking on these summer forecasts as we're again continuing to see how things shape up, especially with El Nino? I think the latest thing that the news wire is catching right now on El Nino is that, for the US, we just don't know. I mean, it
Yeah.
could bring can bring some very like not too much of a difference year to year. what's your thinking on the latest of what, we could see here moving through the summer?
I mean, I would agree with that. El Nino is going to become a much bigger story in August. So here's the new CPC. Okay. They're trying to drift the ridge to the west, bring in all the heat west. This is July the 4th to July 17th. They're probably going to do a better job at bridging in these wetter areas where I just drew the squiggly line too. And here's why I would support that. Temperature wise, look, this is week 2, the heat building. Okay, we can sustain heat, Corn Belt, Midwest, Upper Midwest for a while, gives the West a break. But as you get into week 3, do you see how it's starting to peel itself back? Week 4, it's anchoring down farther to the south. Week 5, the end of July, it's down here. If you end up putting high pressure in that area, well, let me draw you on the precipitation map. If you put high pressure down in this area, it gets hot and dry there. And you have an active southwest monsoon, storms that run over that ridge and dive into the east. So I would tell you that I would probably paint a lot of this. Let's just color it all in. I'd put more green in there. I think they're going to be ridge riding storms at that point. And here is what I said. We got to wait until this point in June. You ready? Here's the current ocean temperatures. Oh, yeah, everybody's talking about El Nino. But as you and I discuss, you better watch right here. And over the last several weeks, there's been just surges of warmer water moving toward that region. Had that gone cold, Dawson, I would have been talking about July heat and drought stress in the Midwest, and it's just not there. So as we think about it, how big is this El Nino? Well, it's the strongest we've ever observed at this point in the year, right there. 2026, you go all the way back to 1940. We've never seen a more potent El Nino at this point. What does it mean? Well, I can at least show you what the Climate Prediction Center is saying. I mean, look at that temperature graph there in July all the way to October. I mean, Dawson, if it doesn't get sustained heat in the midsection of the country, where's the major risk on the corn crop and soybean crop? I guess I could tell you it's disease pressure. I mean, that's really what it's going to be. But have a look as you progress through the summer. Can you almost see that they're wanting to do the same thing? Bring the storms in through there, drier to the south. I mean, look at that. That seems to be a theme in the forecast, and it's also being echoed by the long range outlook from the IRI multi-model probability forecast group. Now, before I zoom in on the U.S., look, weak Indian monsoon. We've talked about that. Drought Indonesia. We've talked about that. Look at the dryness over here on this side of Australia. They grow a lot of winter crops there and there. Wetter, look at this, wetter season, wetter dry season for South America. And if you come in here to North America and zoom in, they're going a little drier Midwest, upper Midwest, but I think that's too aggressive. I really do. I think we're going to see storms all through this corridor. I would not have drawn that so dry in Iowa and Minnesota going into July, August, and September, honestly. But one last thing before I want to get your opinion on some of this, okay? Go back to global. Let's go all the way out there. Oh, I don't know, September, October, November. Look at this, or maybe even 1 month further, October, November, December. Look at how wet they're forecasting southern Brazil and how dry northern Brazil is. Dawson, let's watch that. That could be a really amazing story come harvest in North America, planting in South America that we're going to have to just pay attention to. So that's what I'm thinking right now. And you're right. It's the line in the sand day, and I hope I just drew it well for you.
Yeah, I mean, so far what we're seeing is not necessarily any overt risk. Like there's always going to be risk with weather. We're going to get some, we can get some localized flood and get some disease pressure. But we've seen, unless it's like 2019, that, we're not wiping out a large portion of the crop, especially here in the US.
Yeah. And Dawson, I do have a crop conditions model. I mean, everybody has one. I'll just throw my numbers out there because I don't have any skin in the game. I can just tell you what the model says. Right now, I've got 184.1 on corn and I've got 52.1 on beans. Excuse me, 52.4 on beans. And that's because when the model is run and the crop conditions are the way they are through this point in June, it assumes normal weather through the rest of the season. And it's like, it's going to be great. I'm telling you though, we have got to spend as much time as possible thinking about where did I put it here, that protecting this crop now that maybe some of this yield is locked in. I actually think in addition to flooding and some nutrient loss, we're going to have some disease pressure that could knock back those numbers. And I don't think, by the way, that the conditions ratings at this point in June account for the potential loss to disease going forward.
Yeah, I mean, is that kind of the next conversation that producers have to have, not on a market's perspective, but just agronomically, is just having those conversations with their local agronomist and making sure that we can, make sure that disease is not a huge, overwhelming issue come this summer.
Yeah, and I mean, I've already heard multiple reports of tar spot being found all over the Midwest, and so
Yep.
yeah, I just get worried about it because I know it's another thing that can affect the bottom line. And if I can get out ahead of it and show the growers what I at least know in terms of weather, then they can take the right action steps to protect their crop, which is our hope.
All right. Well, always appreciate that extra perspective there here moving forward. So yeah, definitely answering a little bit more questions. Going to be seeing how things shape around with, yeah, if that ridge does get down in the south and we continue to see some fairly decent active weather for much of the portion of the crop here as we continue to develop through the beginning parts of the summer. So I think we'll end it right there this week. And again, always appreciate your insights, Eric.
Yeah, you bet. Good talking to you, Dawson.